At what age did you first begin reading? Were you earlier or later than what society has deemed to be average? Well, the answer to this could be drastically affected if you have dyslexia, which the British Dyslexia Association defines as a specific learning difficulty affecting information processing and mainly highlighted in reading and writing ability. I'm the oldest of 5 children, and although I personally am not dyslexic, one of my brothers and my younger sister are both dyslexic, and I've witnessed their struggles growing up with literacy as a result. Despite being greatly undiagnosed, the Yale Center for Dyslexia and Creativity still currently estimates that between 15 to 20% of the US population are dyslexic. So the probability of either yourself or someone close being affected is high. Today, I'm going to cover 3 of the most common areas affected. I'll first explain how dyslexia can affect writing, then reading, and finally, numeracy. The first thing that comes to mind for most people when thinking of dyslexia would be difficulty with reading and writing, and so this is what I'm going to talk about first. Poor handwriting, confusion with upper and lowercase letters, and spelling the same word differently multiple times in the same piece of work are all common indicators of dyslexia in written work. In Baguette's 2024 paper, Dysgraphia and Dyslexia Indicators, Analyzing Children's Writing, the author explains the signs of dyslexia in written work. My brother was only diagnosed with dyslexia at 14. However, prior to his diagnosis, the issues with his handwriting were becoming increasingly prominent, with nearly every piece of his work practically illegible to his teachers. Of course, beyond high school, the reliance on handwriting lessens, as we increasingly end up using laptops. This can mean that the written signs of dyslexia are harder to spot, especially given the prevalence of grammar checking tools. However, it also means that dyslexia's impact on written work digitally is much less so than written work conducted predominantly on paper, and therefore dyslexia observation in written ability is much more common in younger age groups. Although dyslexia is more common in writing in younger age groups, it's typically much more diagnosed by reading in older age groups such as ours. Hesitancy, word omission or repetition, and missing lines can all be common signs of dyslexia in reading. In Blackman's 1997 paper, Foundations of Reading Acquisitions and Dyslexia, Implications for Early Intervention, the author explains how dyslexia can affect reading. My parents always said that I was really quick to learn to read as a child, and although my younger siblings perhaps weren't quite so quick, they were still always around the average. That was until my little sister Evie began learning to read and write, and her struggle became obvious. As her peers quickly progressed through the different levels of reading books, she struggled to get past the first and easiest levels, books with pictures and a maximum of 4 or 5 words on the page. Now, as college students, it's far less likely that those currently undiagnosed with dyslexia will present with reading difficulties as pronounced as those in younger age groups. Nonetheless, as college reading difficulties increase from high school, managing dyslexia can still become increasingly problematic. So I've now covered how dyslexia can affect reading and writing, the 2 more typical areas which we tend to associate. However, many of us fail to realise the potential for dyslexia to affect numeracy too. Although dyscalculia is effectively a separate diagnosable disorder affecting maths ability, dyslexia's impact on information processing and reading is still frequently displayed in numerical ability too. Confusion between signs such as the multiplication and addition signs, difficulty with mental arithmetic, and difficulty with sequencing numbers are all common ways of dyslexia showing in numerical skills. In Mark's 2024 paper, neurocognitive mechanisms of co-occurring maths difficulties in dyslexia, the author explains how dyslexia can reveal itself in mathematical reasoning ability. Both my brother and sister struggled with maths growing up. They consistently performed well under the average expected for their age, and along with the fact that they were performing under the average in reading and writing too, it just led to teachers coming to the conclusion that they were less intelligent, when, in fact, they just had a different way of thinking and processing information. Unfortunately, many of us still fail to realise the impact dyslexia has on numeracy, as we typically only perceive its adverse effects to be in reading and writing. Although the impact on numeracy is very much prominent, it is still much more known for its effect in the first two areas that I discussed. So, in conclusion, today I've spoken firstly about how dyslexia can impact writing, secondly, reading, and finally, numeracy. And together, these are the three most common areas affected by dyslexia. With close to 20% of the US population estimated to be living with dyslexia, perhaps we really should pay more attention to these areas in our day-to-day lives.